The TV went silent as Mr. John angrily slammed the remote onto his desk, making a paperweight wobble. His jaw tightened and frustration showed clearly on his face. Leaning back in his chair, he rested his hand under his chin. Another embarrassment. How many more times will he ruin this family's reputation? He turned to his assistant, who stood nervously by the door holding a tablet. Bring him here and call Dr. Choi. If this is just another one of his tantrums, he can deal with it himself. But if it's serious, I need a solution. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. The assistant quickly nodded and left the room, leaving Mr. John sitting alone in silence. In the large living room of the John mansion, Jungkook lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone with a casual smirk. The headlines about him were endless, most of them exaggerated. Lost cause, he muttered with a dry laugh, tossing his phone aside. He reached for another drink when he heard the heavy footsteps of the father's assistant. The man's voice was firm. Mr. John wants to see you. Jungkook raised an eyebrow but didn't move. Instead, he leaned back, looking amused. What's the reason this time? Another tabloid headline about me? The assistant stayed silent. His face seems unreadable. With a sigh, Jungkook stood up, fixing his shirt lazily. Fine, let's hear the old man's complaints today. Do you even realize what you have done this time? Mr. John's angry voice filled the room as Jungkook walked in. Which part? The fight at the club or the fact that your PR team had to clean up after me again? He replied, looking unbothered. His father didn't respond. Instead, he slammed a folder on the desk, making Jungkook flinch. Inside were photos of Jungkook leaving a club looking messy, angry faces of other guests in the background, and a video of him throwing a punch. You are a disgrace to this family, Mr. John said sharply. His face was red with anger. Do you know how many deals we have lost because of your behavior? How many people doubt our family because of you? Jungkook's smirk disappeared. His expression turned blank as he spoke. Isn't that all you care about? Deals, money, reputation? When have you ever cared about me? Enough, his father shouted, pointing a finger at him. You are going to fix this, whether you want to or not. I have hired a psychiatrist to deal with you. Jungkook scoffed, folding his arms. A shrink? That's your big solution? She's your last chance. Work with her or you are on your own. No more money, no more support. Let's see how long you survive without the family name. Silence filled the room for a moment. Jungkook's jaw clenched as his father's ultimatum sank in. Fine, but don't expect me to make it easy, he said before leaving the room. Across the city, you sat in your warm, quiet office, sipping coffee while reviewing your schedule. A call from the John family interrupted your thoughts. Taking on a high-profile client was never simple, especially someone like Jungkook. The stories about him were everywhere, but as the assistant explained the situation, the name stirred a faint memory, something familiar, though you couldn't figure out why. Dr. Choi, will you take the case? The assistant's voice snapped you back to the present. After a brief pause, you replied, Yes, I'll meet him tomorrow. The next day, the office was quiet, save for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. You were sitting behind your desk, files neatly arranged, pen poised in your hand. When the door opened, your new client John Jungkook strolled in. His confident steps and the air around him told you all you needed to know before he even spoke. He dropped into the chair across from you without a word, leaning back casually. His dark eyes scanned the room before landing on you. You don't look like a psychiatrist, he said while his lips curved into a smirk as he studied you. You remind me of someone very close. You maintain your professional look, ignoring his sharp gaze. That happens sometimes. People often project familiarity onto others. You replied very calmly. Jungkook chuckled, clearly amused. Projection. Is that what this is? He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbow on the arm of the chair. Well, Doc, let's get this over with. What do you need me to do? Spill my deepest, darkest secrets? His tone was mocking. You met his sarcasm with calmness. You don't need to do anything you're not ready for. This is your space to talk about whatever's on your mind or not. The choice is yours. He snorted, leaning back again. Oh, I'm here to make my dad happy. He thinks he can buy everything, including my sanity. Let me guess, he offered you a ridiculous fee to fix me, didn't he? You didn't rise to the bait. What your father chooses to do isn't my concern. My focus is on helping you if you are open to it. Jungkook gave a slow clap while his grin turned almost predatory. Wow, you are good at this whole shrink thing. I bet you have heard worse than me, huh? Do you think you'll survive, pretty doctor? You held his gaze firmly, your voice steady. Don't worry about me, Mr. John. I've handled difficult clients before. I have plenty of experience. He seemed taken aback for a moment, then scoffed. We'll see about that. The session continued with Jungkook offering nothing but short, dismissive answers. His body language screamed defiance, and his smirk never left. Finally, he stood abruptly. Let's cut to the chase. You're wasting your time. I don't need therapy, and honestly, I'm not sure you belong here either. He said, walking near you, your desk, and leaning slightly. You looked up at him, your expression stayed neutral. What makes you think that? He shrugged. This professional act of yours, it's cute, but we both know you don't scare easily. I could make things very uncomfortable for you though. He moved closer, invading your personal space. His smirk darkened. What if I wanted to change the rules of this little game? How far would you go to keep me as your client? Tell me, Doc, what would you do if I crossed a line? Would you run out of here? Would you cry? Or would you try to handle me professionally? His tone was playful, but his eyes held a challenge. Then, without warning, he reached out, his fingers brushed against your arm. You think you can survive me, pretty doctor? Let's see. You didn't flinch, you didn't pull back. Instead, you met his gaze with a calm, steady expression. Your voice was firm but measured. Mr. John, if you're attempting to intimidate me or test my boundaries, let me be very clear. It won't work. Your actions, however inappropriate, are a reflection of your own struggles, not mine. I'm here to help you, not to react to you. For a moment, Jungkook froze. His smirk faded. He hadn't expected you to remain so unshaken. You rose from your chair, slowly maintaining eye contact. Physical intimidation is a common tactic when someone feels out of control. If that's what's happening, I would encourage you to explore why you feel the need to behave this way, but let me assure you, I'm not afraid of you. Jungkook straightened, his expression looked unreadable now. So you are not as fragile as you look? He said, taking a step back. No, and if you continue to cross boundaries, we'll end this session and I'll report your behavior to your father. I would prefer to avoid that, but I will do what's necessary to maintain a professional environment. For a moment, silence filled the room, then Jungkook smirked again, though it lacked the same cocky edge. Not bad, Doc, not bad at all. I'll admit that you're really different and you got some boldness. I didn't think you would handle me like that, but now I'll definitely want to know you more. You sat back down, maintaining your professional look. I'm here to help you, Mr. Jungkook, not to play games. If you're willing to start taking this seriously, we can make progress. Otherwise, I won't waste your time or mine. Jungkook gave you a lingering glance, then leaned back in his chair with a soft chuckle. Even though I hate such things, but now I want to. I'm really looking forward to know you and see how you can change me. You didn't say anything. The first few sessions had been a challenge. Jungkook had been stubborn, dismissive, and hard to deal with. But over time, things started to change. It was small at first. He began showing up on time, no longer making you wait while he played with his phone or took random calls. Then he started dropping by without appointments. One afternoon, as you were writing notes from another session, Jungkook walked into your office unannounced. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. Jungkook, you're not scheduled for today. He shrugged, his hands in his pockets. Yeah, well, I wasn't feeling great. Thought I would drop by. Isn't this where I'm supposed to talk about my problems? You sighed. It is, but I usually prefer scheduled visits. This is still a professional setting. Don't stress, Doc. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just feel like I needed to talk. Though his visit wasn't planned, you motioned him to sit. Alright, let's talk. What's bothering you? He sat on the couch while his eyes were just on you. You sat down across him. Shall we start? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Why are you always so professional, Doc? I mean, now we are not strangers and we can talk about here and there. You know, I've started liking you a lot. No one has ever listened to me the way you do, and I just can't stop thinking about you. You got up. I think we should wait for your next appointment. Ryan. You felt your stomach dropping when he grabbed your wrist and slowly stood behind you, walking near. He was just coming closer. I'm not joking, Ryan. I never felt connected to anyone, but something inside me just don't want to go away from you. Why are you not listening to this? You turned towards him, taking a step back and maintaining your professionalism. I can understand why you're feeling that way, Jungkook, but believe me, that's not permanent and I'm here to support you. It would be better if you come tomorrow and before you finish, he started speaking. Do you know what it's like to grow up in a house where everyone's too busy to notice you? His sudden question surprised you, but you gulped and sat on the couch, trying to forget what just happened. Tell me about it. He exhaled slowly, his eyes were fixed on you, and you could see the pain and longing in them. My mom was always traveling, and my dad was more interested in his business deals than his kids. The only time he noticed me was when I did something wrong. So eventually, I just stopped trying to be good. At least when I screwed up, he paid attention. Your heart ached for the boy he must have been. That sounds incredibly lonely, Jungkook. He nodded while his jaw tightened. Yeah, well, you got used to it. People only care about you when you're useful to them. That's just how it works. Is that why you push people away? You asked gently. He looked at you sharply, his expression unreadable. Maybe, or maybe it's just easier that way. You leaned forward slightly. But is it what you want? After a moment of silence, he replied in an almost inaudible voice, No. Back in your apartment, you were looking at the reports of Jungkook, the way he behaves, the way it feels like he craves attention because he always longed for that. You realize that his family's ignorance was the reason he behaves like that. Then you remember your past, always, every day you do, because that memory can never fade. In a very young age, you got orphaned. You lived with your relatives. After years of hard work, you had rebuilt your life and made a name for yourself as a well known psychiatrist. Your journey hadn't been easy, but you had finally found stability and purpose. When you were handed over the case of Jungkook, there was an unexplainable familiarity, like you had met him before, but you brushed it off as a coincidence. After all, memories from childhood were hazy at best. Still, as you listened to him talk, or more often avoiding talking, you couldn't shake the feeling. that his struggles were connected to something you had felt before, something personal. Over the next few weeks, the same thing kept happening. Jungkook started coming by more often, saying he didn't feel well or needed to talk about something. Noticed that his usual confident attitude seemed to fade during these visits. He started asking you questions not just about therapy, but about your work, your day, and sometimes even about your personal life. You always kept your answers professional, but it was clear he was curious about you. Soon you realized these visits weren't really about therapy at all. Jungkook just wanted to be near you. It was late into their session, the room filled with a quiet intensity as Jungkook shifted uncomfortably on the couch. The usual arrogance was missing, replaced by a subtle unease. Mention the fire again in your dream. Do you feel ready to talk more about it? You said your pen hovering was over your notebook. Jungkook let out a breath. This session was really hard, not only for him but you as well. It's not just a dream. I know it happened. He paused, his fingers twitching against the fabric of his pants. It was in my old neighborhood. There was a fire in a small house nearby. I remember standing there, frozen, watching it burn. You felt a lump form in your throat, but you maintained your calm demeanor. What else do you remember? Jungkook frowned while his voice lowered. There was a kid inside. She was screaming for help. I couldn't move. I just stood there like a coward. He ran a hand through his hair as if he was frustrated. I wanted to save her, but by the time I tried, the firefighters were already pulling them out. Your chest tightened as fragments of your own memory surfaced, the crackling of flames, the suffocating smoke, the desperation in your young voice as you called out for someone, anyone. Do you remember what happened to the child? You asked, carefully masking your emotions. She taken away. I never saw her again, but I heard she lost her parents in the fire. That night, it changed everything. I hated myself for not doing more. She was someone I was so close to, and after her, my life again became a mess. You tried to control your tears, but your eyes filled. Hearing all that, hearing he was that boy from your past, it was hard for you to stay professional. Sometimes, when we are young, there's only so much we can do. It's not your fault, Jungkook. He glanced at you, his eyes narrowed slightly. Why do you say that like you know? For a moment, silence filled the room. The air felt thick with unspoken truths. Finally, you spoke. Your voice was soft but steady. Because I was that child. Jungkook's expression shifted from confusion to shock. His jaw tightened. You? I lived in that neighborhood. You continued, your voice trembled slightly despite your best efforts. I remember the fire, I remember screaming for help, and I remember someone standing outside watching. Jungkook stared at you, he couldn't able to stop himself from coming near you. It was you, all this time, I've been carrying this guilt and you? He cut himself off, running a hand over his face. I didn't remember at first. It was only when you started mentioning the dream that things began to click. But Jungkook, you were just a kid. You couldn't have saved me. He shook his head. He still blamed himself. I could have done something, anything. I should have been there. You were my friend, even after the fire. The memories of our time together kept me going. You didn't fail me, Jungkook. You were the one good thing in my life back then. Jungkook shook his head. His tears started falling. You have no idea what I have become after you. There was no one to listen to me, no one to care the way you did. You have no idea how much I have tried to find you, but you were nowhere. The room was quiet, the weight of your shared memories filling the space. Jungkook's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and his usually confident face showed pain and vulnerability. You stepped closer, hesitating for a moment before gently placing your hand on his arm. Jungkook, you don't need to carry this guilt anymore. We were just kids. There was only so much we could do, but what mattered was the bond we had, and you tried your best. Jungkook held your hand tightly as though afraid you might vanish again. His dark eyes were intense, brimming with emotion as he took a shaky breath. I can't lose you again. When I first saw you here, I didn't know why, but something about you felt familiar. I didn't understand it then. I just knew I couldn't stop myself from wanting to be around you. You opened your mouth to respond, but he didn't let you. He stepped closer, his gaze piercing through the walls you tried to build. And now that I know that you were her, my Ryan, I just I can't stay away from you anymore. I have already wasted so much time. Jungkook, you started pulling your hand back gently, though your heart ached at his words. This is complicated. So much has happened, and I don't care how complicated it is. He interrupted, his voice firm but filled with vulnerability. Do you know what it's like to live every day wondering if you'll ever find the one person who truly understood you, the one person who made everything feel okay, even when it wasn't? You looked at him, your throat felt tight. When you were taken away, it was like losing a part of myself, and when I couldn't find you, I thought maybe I had imagined it, maybe you weren't real. But you were real, Ryan, and now you are here, standing right in front of me. How can I just let that go? Your heart raced as his words sank in. You wanted to push him away, to tell him it wasn't that simple, but the sincerity in his voice, the depth of his emotions made it impossible. Jungkook, this isn't just about what we had as kids. We have both changed. Life has changed us. He stepped even closer, so close you could feel the warmth radiating from him. I know, but some things don't change. I loved you then, even if I was too young to know what that meant. And now, after everything, I still do. I have never stopped. Your breath hitched at his confession, tears filled in your eyes. I know it's sudden, and I know you might need time, but please, Ryan, don't push me away. We have already lost so much time. Let me make it up to you. Let me prove that this us is worth it. You felt your heart melting, your heart leaning towards him despite the fear and hesitation. Jungkook, this is overwhelming. I don't know if I can just jump into this. He reached for your hand again, holding it between both of his as if anchoring himself to you. You don't have to jump. Just take one step. That's all I'm asking. Let me be here for you, the way you have been here for me. Tears spilled down your cheeks as you looked into his eyes filled with love, hope, and a vulnerability that broke down the last of your walls. Slowly you nodded, your voice barely above a whisper. Okay. You said, your lips trembled into a small, uncertain smile. Jungkook's face lit up, his own tears falling freely. He pulled you into a tender embrace, holding you as though he had been waiting his whole life for this moment. Thank you. I promise, Ryan, I won't let you down this time. As you rested your head against his chest, you felt a sense of peace you hadn't known in years. It was scary, yes, but it also felt like coming home, and for the first time you let yourself believe that maybe, just maybe, the two of you could build something beautiful together.